the former British intelligence officer. Philip Ingram joins me now. I suppose we've got claim and counter-claim, the fog of war. Do we really know what has happened in Bakhmut? I suppose one thing is certain, it has pretty much been flattened and obliterated.
Oh, completely flattened. You know, it's day 452 of Vladimir Putin's 10-day special military operation, and we're talking about Bakhmut yet again. The first shells landed in Bakhmut on the 17th of May last year, and there's been heavy fighting to try and capture it from the Wagner private military group headed by Prigozhin for at least the last 9 months, if not slightly longer. It's a tiny little area on what's a 1,200-kilometre plus front line. That's the equivalent of from here in London, where we are, to Barcelona, and we're focusing very much on Bakhmut, and that's a significant piece, I think. What
about any kind of successes for the Ukrainians? I suppose they're holding the Russians there, so that's fairly positive. What else? It is a success. Well, if we look into Bakhmut and see what's happening, a few days ago, the map, this orange area, was where Russia had confirmed to have captured up to. They claimed the purple hatched area. And then only a few days later this morning, the assessment has changed slightly different. The Russians are claiming a little bit more. Now, speaking to a friend of mine on the ground only this morning, he says there's still fighting in the western areas in Ukrainian-held trenches and in amongst some of the buildings. But you're right in mentioning the Russians have been advancing in. The Ukrainians have been fixing them in place. And they've got their defences down now outside Bakhmut and in those very early edges, and been letting the Russians slowly but surely advance through, because that's allowing them to trade a little bit of space to buy time. And that time's allowed the Ukrainians to attack and attrit a large number of the Russians that are coming in, estimates of over 30,000 Russian dead in recent months, and to allow the Ukrainians then to take large numbers of their troops off, send them off to the west to get trained in Western tanks, Western infantry fighting vehicles, Western artillery, and get them refreshed, ready to come back in for potential counteroffensives. Prigozhin has already turned around and said that his Wagner private military group have had success. This is him earlier today, just in front of the railway building, and we have geolocated this particular video into Bakhmut. He's held this, his troops have held this for quite some weeks now, so he wasn't right at the very edge of the front line, but I wouldn't expect him to be brave enough to go and do that. Now, that fixing you're talking about, that's quite encouraging, isn't it, for the Ukrainians, as in what might be lying ahead? It is, and it's fixed the Russians in two ways. It's fixed them physically in Bakhmut, and there's been reports over the last few days of the Russians moving troops from other parts of their occupied territories in to reinforce what's going on in Bakhmut. Prigozhin has said he's going to move his troops out at the end of this week, so Russian troops need to move in to do that. And it's fixed psychologically as well. As we're all focused on that, the Ukrainians are preparing for the counteroffensives. And I think there's three areas that could happen. The first one is back into Bakhmut again. As Prigozhin pulls out and the Russian regular military move in, that's always a difficult period for the military and could be exploited by the Ukrainians if they wanted to. Another option is in the northeast, like they did with Kharkiv earlier. They take a big bite of territory back again. They did that quite successfully last year in Kharkiv and Kherson. And the final option, I think, is from Zaporizhia, and if they're feeling really brave, down towards the sea. There's a few areas there where you can cut the lines of communications that are essential to that land bridge from Crimea, therefore isolating Crimea further and isolating the troops that there are in the Donbass region that Russia's